This is one of the biggest corruption cases in the history of the city of New York.
Culture was, we own the streets. You don't take the streets from us.
We learned that there were cops on the take.
It was just money, 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 money. And I took a bunch.
I wasn't going after cops. I was going after thieves and drug dealers. At one point, I think we had 4 or 5 officers wired at the same time.
So he goes, if I were you, I'd cooperate. What else did I know? You know, I became a rat.
Over 12 police officers will soon be facing federal indictments.
This was the worst case of police corruption ever.
The cops were charged with stealing over $1 million in taxpayer funds.
I went from putting handcuffs on people to having handcuffs put on me.
Good? Yeah, I can do it.
New York City in the 1980s is all about excess. From newly minted Wall Street tycoons to celebrity real estate barons to the world's most famous socialites, the city is filled with people who want more of everything all the time.
Manhattan, you had all the clubs, everybody's partying, everything was a good time. There was not one bad night to go out. You can go out on a Tuesday night in Manhattan and have a ball.
But those in the fringe have been marginalized for over a decade. And as the glitz of Madonna's material world dulls, the angst of rock's new sound is felt on the streets of New York.
The city was very gritty, dirty. People didn't want to go outside. People stayed in their homes. It was bad. The murder rate in New York was dramatically higher. There were over 2,000 murders a year at various points during those years.
There was a particular headline after some series of murders in the New York Post which referenced Mayor David Dinkins. It said, "Dave, do something." Crime was so out of control and something needed to be done.
Drugs are decimating the city, and nowhere is this destruction more prevalent than in one of New York's most historic and well-known neighborhoods, Harlem.
Harlem had been and continues now to be a vibrant part of the city, but it certainly suffered a significant part of the rise in drug crime back in that late 80s, early 90s time period.
The residents of Harlem watch helplessly as dealers infiltrate their neighborhood, and those hired to serve and protect don't always have their back.
The way to go.
Praise and boom!
In 1990, Joe Walsh is assigned to the city's 30th precinct, just north of West Harlem. It's a small but crime-drenched area referred to by cops as the 3-0.
The 30th Police Precinct was in Upper Manhattan, the west side. It ran from West 133rd Street to 155th Street. We had the Hudson River to Bradhurst Avenue. Very, very small. But the activity in the 3-0 was more than most precincts 3 to 4 times our size. I remember the first night, somebody went on the radio, "You got all the newbies on tonight, just be patient." You got a shots fired call. I'm out of the academy 8 days with chasing a guy with a gun on fire escape. And it's like, welcome to New York.
After a few months in the 30th, Walsh joins a unit led by Sergeant Kevin Nannery.
Nannery's group was a bunch of young guys, hungry guys, all early 20s to mid-20s. There was himself as a sergeant, and there was about 8 to 10 of us. To prove ourselves, we couldn't take crap from anybody. When you're on a scene and there's a guy talking back to you and you got 4 or 5 other veteran cops there, it's like, give the guy a whack. Shut the f*** up. Shut the f*** up. So the other guy's, okay, he's good. They get to trust you more. The culture was, we own the streets. You don't take the streets from us. We own the streets. It was us against the world.
The team becomes known as Nannery's Raiders for their aggressive street style. As a hungry rookie, Walsh is in his element.
I wanted arrests. When you get guys off the street with a gun, it's better for your career because you can go into anti-crime. You can go into a citywide crime.
To make a legal search and arrest, cops need probable cause or reasonable suspicion.
Sometimes if I suspected somebody that had something or did something, we would make an arrest without having reasonable suspicion, without knowing that they did something wrong. We would search them. If I found something, drugs or guns or anything, then I'd be like, okay, what's the story? After the arrest, we filled in the blanks. To go through the proper channels, I was not allowed to search them. Technically, there's nothing I can do. But if I suspected somebody that had something or did something, yeah, I was looking at you. I was going to get you.
Lying on police reports is Walsh's first taste of working outside the law.
I knew the right from wrong, but then everybody says, this is the way it is. So it's like, all right, this is the way it is. This is the way I'm going to do it.
Turns out Walsh and the other Raiders aren't the only cops in New York bending the rules. And the Manhattan District Attorney's Office notices the growing epidemic.
I was the chief of the official corruption unit in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So I had responsibility to investigate police corruption in Manhattan. What typically happens with police misconduct, what you'll see is that there'll be a particular egregious case that captures everybody's attention.
One of those cases happens in 1992. Former New York City police officer Michael Dowd infuriates citizens of New York with his blatant abuse of power.
And Michael Dowd, he was notorious. He was driving his red Corvette right into the precinct. Hey, a brand new Corvette. Fancy clothes, going down to Atlantic City on the weekend.
That was the event, I think, that triggered the outrage about what was going on within the police department, the inability of the police department to police itself. That was one of the significant triggers that led to the creation of the Mullen Commission.
The Mullen Commission is a panel created by Mayor Dinkins and led by Judge Milton Mullen, whose mission is to identify and investigate corruption within the New York City Police Department. During the first televised inquiry, they present their star witness, Michael Dowd.
While you were in uniform and on duty, did you commit extortion?
Yes.
Did you engage in narcotics trafficking?
Yes.
Did you protect drug operations?
Yes.
With Dowd's testimony fresh in the public's memory, the Marlin Commission continues to sniff out police misconduct, and it's not long before it sets its sights on Harlem.
In May 1993, the chief of the Public Corruption Unit came to my office and said, Marlin Commission called, they've got some information about some potential corruption in the 30th Precinct, and he said they're gonna come by, meet with you, and want you to handle the case. They didn't have much more than the reported information, what others were telling them, most of it being hearsay.
Investigating fellow cops is tricky. To dig into the rumors, Horowitz puts together a team of veteran detectives.
Prior to joining the 30 Precinct investigation, I worked with Mike Horowitz on another investigation. Michael suggested my name to join the team that NYPD was putting together to work the 30th Precinct case. I was Lieutenant Commander Detective Squad. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and I come from a long line of New York police officers. My dad retired as an assistant chief in housing police. He had 5 brothers. 3 of those brothers were NYPD. Sometimes when he had like administrative work to do and he would just go in when he was a detective, I would go in with him, and I just thought it was the coolest job in the world. I just wanted the NYPD to come out at the end and be able to say, we can police ourselves.
I worked as a sort of like a general investigator, an agent for the whole U.S. Attorney's Office. My father was a cop, New York City cop. So I grew up with cops in my home. They were there. They used to carpool together. They'd have their cigarettes and coffee in the morning. So I kind of knew the mentality of a police officer, but a police officer is the hardest person to investigate because he's a police officer. He knows how we work. You know, you have to be a little bit sharper to catch one.
While the investigation simmers in the background through the summer of '93, 30 cops like Joe Walsh are trying to maintain order on the streets of Harlem.
At the start of tours, it was like, I never knew what I was going to get. I was always, today's the day we're going to get into a shooting. Today's the day we're going to find the 10 kilos and $100,000. The drug dealers, they were very well organized. It was surveillance, cat and mouse. We would watch from either across the street, down the block, on the roofs. We had 2 main focuses, the cars and the apartments. We saw a car with that out-of-state license plate, be aware of it. And the apartments is where everything was. Our goal was to get into an apartment.
One tactic the team uses to get into an apartment is something called a key job. If a suspect refused to give up their unit number, the officers would disregard the need for search warrants, take their keys, and find and search the apartment themselves.
The first time I saw a key job was in 555 West 151st Street. We ran into the building, known guns, drug spot. We knew they were drug dealers, we just didn't know what apartment they were in. Nannery and the other guys from the conditions unit got the keys off somebody, and then we went apartment to apartment to apartment. So at the top floor, try each of the locks. No, no, no. Next floor, no, 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 no. Next floor, bingo, we're in.
In the early 90s, a spike in complaints about police misconduct has New York City's Mayor David Dinkins scrambling to clean up the mess. In response, the Marlin Commission launches a massive inquiry and zeroes in on the department's 30th Precinct in Harlem. And right away, it provides Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Horowitz with an important piece of intel.
They had information that payoffs were being made by the drug dealers to members of a undercover plainclothes street crimes unit. They were payoffs related to threatened arrests, potential arrests. You don't just go out and arrest police officers based on some rumors on the street. We had leads, and then we had to follow up on the leads to figure out were they legit.
The payoffs are allegedly taking place at a local bodega. Detectives monitor it closely, trying to catch a crime in progress.
One of the earliest steps we took was, the first instance, putting some undercovers and getting them into the store just to have eyes on the place. Which cops are showing up there regularly? Who are the drug dealers showing up? Figuring out who's running the store.
As the summer of '93 drags on, the team stakes out the shop for 2 months, looking for the smoking gun needed to prosecute police officers.
The way you do these kind of cases is you have to have a good source, a snitch. You need a good snitch.
Finally, in August, Horowitz's team catches an unexpected break and lands the snitch they need. It turns out the bodega's owner, Wanchi, has purchased food stamps illegally. That's enough to roll him over and get him to cooperate with investigators.
What we're able to do is wire the store.
With Wanchi's bodega wired, investigators put together the rest of the pieces for a proper sting.
We look in the neighborhood, we realize City College is right across the street. And so we can put up a pole camera from their building going right into the bodega.
You have the regular utility company puts it up, and everyone just assumes that's being put up there for, for repair, when in fact it's a camera on the pole. So you're able to get shots of that 24/7.
With tape rolling, the team continues to watch the store to see who might be involved.
We would watch the videos. Wanchi's bodega was the star of the camera, if you want to say it.
After a few months of surveillance, detectives noticed one officer in particular coming and going more than anyone else, George Nova. And like Walsh, Nova's a cop in the 30th.
You had Nova on film going into the bodega. The drug dealers would leave an envelope of cash for him there, and he would go to the bodega and pick up the envelope of cash. And then you could have Wanchi say that he comes every Wednesday at 2 o'clock to pick up his money that the drug dealers left for him. And now you had a video that would corroborate what your cooperator was telling you.
With audio and video recordings in hand, investigators finally have the hard evidence they've been looking for. But they uncover something disturbing. Nova is just the tip of the iceberg.
We learned that there were other cops on the take. We learned that this was a much bigger problem than we had even known at the outset. So now what we're thinking about is, how do we get evidence and how do we break into these other groups that are engaged in wrongdoing? We decided George Nova was the person we should go and try and flip.
In September 1993, Horowitz has George Nova arrested for civil rights violations and drug trafficking, and leverages these charges to flip Nova and send him back into the precinct as a mole. Nova agrees to track other cops who are taking payoffs from drug dealers.
Nova had knowledge of other cops who were involved with drug dealers, whether it was taking money, whether it was taking their drugs and then reselling them.
We wire Nova. And that means every day, before he starts his tour of duty, he's meeting our agents, they're wiring him up, and he's going off to work as if he was never arrested, wired up.
Sewing like pockets into the bottom of the pants leg, and we would run the microphones up the seams of the pants because you want the microphones as close to someone's mouth as you could possibly get it.
They're then meeting him at the end of the day, debriefing him on what happened, taking the wire off him, and they're doing it the next day, the same thing.
Once detectives get Nova to be their undercover, the investigation kicks into high gear.
George Nova was very effective at being an undercover and letting us know every day what happened.
There's a saying in law enforcement, right? The good guys stick with the good guys and the bad guys stick with the bad guys. Nova knew who the bad guys in the precinct were.
As Nova creeps around the 30th precinct wired up, Joe Walsh and the rest of Nannery's raiders have no idea and continue to clock in at the very same station before heading out to patrol the streets of Harlem.
And these guys could care less, really, about policing. They were out there too busy doing key jobs where they would take a key off a drug dealer and they'd go to his apartment and they'd do an illegal search and they'd take whatever was in there and off they go. And say, today's your lucky day. We're not arresting you.
The first time I saw it happen, I go, this is nuts. This is against the law. When I saw everybody else doing it, and it was like, oh, well, if they're doing it, I guess this must be, SOP, So I'm like, okay.
But key jobs aren't standard operating procedure, and neither is breaking into apartments.
If we knew it was a drug spot and we didn't have the key, we would kick the door in. We weren't worried about the drug dealers telling on us because what are they going to say? We're trying to sell drugs and the cops are coming in trying to shut us down. That's why we had free reign.
And eventually free reign leads to free money.
Initially we were doing the key jobs at booming doors to get in there and locking the bad guys up. But then we were making crap for money. And it's like, you see these guys, they got thousands of dollars on them and this and that. And meanwhile, I'm making, $1,200 a month or whatever it was. So let me take a couple of bucks. That'd be the beer money for tonight. The first time I did it, it's always the hardest time. I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I do it? Should I not do it? But it's like, I did it.
When the cops feel particularly bold, they call in bogus 911 calls.
If we wanted to get into a building, if we knew a hot spot, I'd go to a payphone, disguise my voice, and give the location, which gave us probable cause to get into the location. And then we get in the apartment. Once we were inside the apartment, we'd search the whole place. One time I made a fake 911 call to an apartment. We got in there and it was just money. And I took a bunch. I forget how much. I was putting it in my bulletproof vest. 100% my word against your word. And if I go into court with a rack full of medals and you're a degenerate 15-time arrestee, who are they going to believe?
As the U.S. Attorney's Office ramps up its efforts to expose police corruption in New York City's 30th precinct, the Manhattan DA's office runs its own investigation into the 3-0.
I had an instance in which a defense attorney went to a special narcotics prosecutor in the district attorney's office and said his client had been arrested for the possession of 2 kilos of cocaine. The attorney confided in the prosecutor that actually his client had 3 kilos and the cops had stole a third.
Burmeister quickly gets approval from Manhattan DA Chief Robert Morgenthau to conduct a sting operation on the streets of Harlem.
I knew that the police officers would assume if they saw a car with out-of-state plates, they would likely find either money or drugs, or maybe even a weapon in the car. We bought a car, and we went to Maryland and put Maryland plates on the car. There was pinhole cameras and recorders in the car. The investigators are adjacent in basically undercover vans. And we had someone driving that car, and he effectively looked like he would be involved in narcotics.
Burmeister's plan works. Within an hour, the out-of-state car is pulled over by a cruiser from the 30th.
One of the cops took him to the back of the car, and I can hear him saying on tape, "This guy's nervous as shit." And in the front seat of the car, he finds a paper bag. We planted roughly $2,000 in the bag, and he takes the cash and he shoves it down the front of his uniform. And then they let the driver go. And we ended up arresting George Alvarez, and he agreed to cooperate with the investigation. That was a huge deal for our investigation.
Now both the feds and the DA have undercover cops wired up and working out of the 30th precinct, George Nova and George Alvarez. It's an unprecedented move that's both exciting and risky. At the end of 1993, the agencies decide to work together to lower the risk of blowing the entire operation.
At one point, it was counterproductive to have it continue as two separate investigations. So we then joined and made this task force so we would not be stepping on each other.
And so I made a point to go over to the Southern District, introduce myself, and say, I want to work with you.
It really gave us the ability to do much more, and it really kicked us into high gear.
But on the streets of Harlem, police officers are stealing thousands of dollars from drug dealers when they should be arresting them. During a routine traffic stop, Joe Walsh makes his biggest single-handed lift.
I was working by myself, and I knew the guy was dirty. Open up the trunk, there are boxes and boxes and boxes of cash. Totally, it's probably $100K. I'll take a little bit. It's like a potato chip. All right, let me have one more. Let me have one more, and wind up taking like 14,000. In my mind, it was like the spoils of war. If it's there, I'll take it. I would like to say I'm a better person saying that I shouldn't have taken the money, but I did it, so I guess I do feel bad, but probably not. Probably not, unfortunately.
The Mullen Commission's hearings continue to portray a broken police department into the spring of 1994. Until now, Joe Walsh and the rest of the 30th have been hearing testimony accusing other precincts of misconduct.
Everybody be watching the Mullen Commission, seeing who was testifying, and you see these guys doing these crazy things.
But all that changes when a cop from the 3-0 takes a stand. Cloaked in shadow and using the alias Officer Otto, the whistleblower exposes the 30th.
Police officers stealing money from drug dealers. Police officers stealing drugs from drug dealers.
Officer Otto's allegations send shockwaves through the station house.
There was an Officer Otto, and it turns out he was from the 3-0. Everybody's like, holy crap, this is hitting close to home. What else do they know?
That question is answered one night after work when rumors circulate about George Nova.
There was a party we had underneath the George Washington Bridge. We used to go have precinct parties there. And George was down there, and then later he had a phone. And he left, and it's like, somehow somebody's like, you guys working with the Fed. They said, he's wired. George is wired? What the hell? That's when you always heard the blue wall of silence. Just keep your mouth shut. Everybody's a tough guy until the bracelets go on. Yeah, then it's like every man for himself.
In the spring of 1994, the undercover investigation into New York City's 30th precinct is a year old, and it's uncovering more corrupt cops than originally suspected. Authorities are working hard to protect the residents of Harlem and rid the neighborhood of police corruption.
We're supposed to be protecting people and stopping people from being victimized. These officers were clearly criminals. I mean, you can't steal guns or steal cocaine or steal cash from anyone and for your own profit while you should be arresting them.
Whispers of the probe begin to spread through the entire NYPD.
There's always like the buzz and what's going on up there. We'd be down in court, and guys from other commands saying, what's going on up in the 3-0? We hear everybody's watching you. Are you doing anything wrong? No, everything's above board. Don't worry, everything's cool.
But when unfamiliar faces and unfamiliar cars start popping up in the neighborhood, Walsh knows he's in trouble.
The first time we heard about the 3-0 being investigated, we would know the same cars would be there every day. Somebody would see a car out of place and other people in the precinct that shouldn't be there. First thing we do was notify everybody of what was going on. We just drive around and see everybody and say, hey, be on the lookout for a blue Taurus. 2 white guys. Just be careful. It got real. Everybody got very scared. I got very scared.
With informants in their midst, a cloud of distrust sweeps through the precinct as cops don't know who's on their side.
We heard about a fair number of the rumors, the suspicions, people not willing to work with each other or talk to one another.
So you're with your group of friends every night. It's like gallows humor. It's like, hey, what's going on? And frisking somebody. Everything's good? Yeah. Checking the back of the leg, see who's wearing a wire and stuff. And you don't know, everybody's done something wrong. No angels there. And it's like, could be anybody, unfortunately.
As paranoia about cooperating officers heats up, investigators realize their time could be running out.
I mean, cops are not stupid. At one point, I think we had 4 or 5 officers wired at the same time, feeding us all sorts of information. It does make it more dangerous because everybody's on edge, right? If, someone wearing a wire, a cop gets made, I mean, you can be potentially putting a cooperating officer's life in danger.
Anytime there's a gun involved, and we know obviously cops carry guns, anything can happen.
The inherent risk of wiring on-duty officers comes to a head one day at the station house.
The district attorney's office had flipped an officer by the last name of Alvarez, and his partner went up and he was being accused of being a rat, of cooperating. They got into a fight. Someone reached for someone's gun, and Alvarez's gun went off and shot his partner in the foot.
At some point in every long-term investigation, somebody takes a burn. That was probably the closest call that we had during the investigation.
That breach in trust compromises the investigation, and authorities realize they can't continue a covert operation any longer. They pull the moles out of the precinct and prepare for a large-scale arrest.
When we got into April, we knew we had about a dozen or so people that we could likely arrest. And it got to the point where we had to start getting people off the street.
I think by now this case was starting to drain on us. Personally, at one point, I just stressed out, and I think I developed some medical conditions that still stay with me today because I felt that we had to prove to the Mullen Commission that we weren't the NYPD that they were claiming we were, and I didn't want to fail.
On April 15, 1994, the task force meets at 26 Federal Plaza to coordinate the biggest takedown of active duty officers in NYPD history.
That morning we had a big TAC meeting.
We had packages put together as to who's going to have what arrest. These are the locations, and then you have to, radio in when you have the person in custody.
When the TAC meeting ended, it was game time. Okay, game on. This is it.
The team scours the borough, and within a few hours, 14 officers from the 30th Precinct are arrested for perjury, civil rights conspiracy, and tax evasion. They are brought in for questioning.
We had the evidence. We could sit with the cop, and we did this every time. Don't say anything. Here's what we know about you. Here's who you did it with. Here's the drug dealer. Here's how much money you got. Once they hear that, they know we're not bluffing.
On that day, I would say that some of the officers were very surprised. Others, I think, had a foreboding sense that something was coming.
A lot of them just kept quiet. Just that look on their face like, I'm in trouble.
As investigators come face to face with their partners who normally lead interrogations, the moment is bittersweet.
When I'm sitting across from these guys, it was actually sad. And one fellow, he just looked at me and he said, I never realized how bad I had become.
They had all betrayed what they were supposed to be doing. And they had all effectively visited real harm on others as well as the city.
I used to say, you know what? I'd have more respect for you if you were a drug dealer doing this than a cop carrying a badge and a gun.
There was not one person in that investigation that I felt sympathy for when that case came down. They were no longer cops.
When word gets back to the 3-0, Walsh and every other dirty cop in the precinct breathe a sigh of relief.
Everybody thought, oh, thank God, it's not me. So I'm like, you know what, I could be okay here. I think I'm safe.
In April 1994, 14 police officers from New York's 30th Precinct are arrested for perjury, civil rights violations, and tax evasion. It's the biggest roundup of corrupt cops in NYPD history.
Once this stuff hit the newspapers, and the whole city knew that something was going on in the 3-0.
There was a media frenzy. There absolutely was.
The New York Times, the Daily News, the New York Post, Newsday. They were all covering this story.
It wasn't something that you normally see, because this is one of the biggest corruption cases in the history of the city of New York.
Newly appointed Police Commissioner Bill Branton wastes no time showing the citizens of New York his stance on the matter.
Following the arrest, Police Commissioner Bratton went to the 30th Precinct. He had the shields of the officers, and he said, no one will ever wear these shields again.
The officers arrested last evening and this morning used their shields not for protection, but as weapons.
Right after the April 15 arrests, what Commissioner Bratton made clear is he had to clean out the precinct of all the bad cops and start fresh there.
All 14 officers are immediately suspended and relieved of their guns and badges. Their crimes against the community leave a trail of broken trust in law enforcement.
No one was going back at that point. The people in that community needed the corrupt cops gone. They had to rebuild trust in the community.
Officer Joe Walsh thinks he dodged a bullet, but as time goes on, more and more arrested cops are snitching to lessen their charges.
A number of officers cooperated, and they in turn gave us additional information that implicated other police officers.
It's precisely what we thought in terms of Nannery, his raiders. We learned about more people who were involved.
2 months later, on his way to work, Walsh is arrested.
June 94, the Knicks were in the playoffs. It was an exciting time in the town. Everybody was having a grand old time on a Sunday. The next day I had a day tour. So I was up at 6:15 to get to the command. Start walking out towards my car. The cars come all over the place. Joe Walsh, yeah, Joe Walsh. He goes, "Where's your gun?" I go, "My gun's in the bag." They said, "We're, internal affairs. We're here to arrest you." So I said, "Listen, do me a favor. I'll get in the car. I'm not going to do anything. Don't cuff me in front of my neighbors." But I thought I was just going to lose my job because nobody would roll over and say Walsh did X, Y, and Z.
But when investigators explain what's going on, Walsh is shocked to learn that's exactly what happened.
My partner was wearing a wire for the feds. The first thing they say, "We have A, B, and C on you." So I'm like, mother of God.
So when we sat down with Joe Walsh, and we had a lot of evidence on him by the time we arrested him, it was about how he could minimize or work off whatever jail sentence he was looking at.
When I met Michael Horowitz, he rammed into my head, the worst thing I can do now is not be truthful. That would only hurt me more.
For Walsh, that means breaking the code of silence and cooperating with the investigation.
You have to realize that a police officer is going to be reluctant to give up another police officer. I understand that. I give a crossroads speech. Do you see it right here? This is you. I have a recording of you taking money there. But if you cooperate, this will be made known to the judge, and the only thing I could say is it's going to help you along the way.
The feds got me an attorney. He goes, "What's the deal? Are we going to fight it, or what are you going to do?" I'm like, "Phil, I did this, and this." He goes, "If I were you, I'd cooperate." So I'm like, okay.
And I think they're remorseful, and a lot of them will say, "What do I need to do? I want to make this right." So they cooperate, and they'll turn on their brother. Yeah, they'll turn on their brother.
When they flip the other guys, I'm like, they're a bunch of cowards. How dare they flip? How dare they flip? Until it happened to me, and then it's like, what do you want to know? They got me. I became a rat.
Early in the morning of June 12, 1994, New York City police officer Joe Walsh is arrested for perjury, civil rights, conspiracy, and tax evasion. He pleads guilty and agrees to cooperate with investigators. Later that day, he contemplates the unthinkable.
After I got arrested, I get home, and I'm sitting there, and I got my gun, I got my shield. I'm like, you know what, it. I'm just gonna end it all. So I got, bite marks on the barrel, and it's like, what am I doing?
Unfortunately, some of his fellow cops do not have this same moment of clarity.
Several committed suicide, which is a tragedy.
It was a very difficult situation to hear about the suicides.
Why I think people took their lives is because they didn't want to go to jail. It's the easy way out. Unfortunately, it's not the easy way out.
It bothers me till this day. It's really something I don't want to talk about.
Throughout the summer of 1994, Walsh and other cooperating officers provide investigators with enough evidence to arrest an additional 14 crooked cops, including Walsh's former boss, Sergeant Kevin Nannery.
It turned out Joe Walsh was very important to the information we gathered because he had worked across a number of different groups of officers, so he could not only help us with Nannery's raiders, but with several other officers as well.
Walsh was prolific. I mean, he had a very good memory. We tried to take the investigation as far as it would go, to see if there's other corruption that was taking place, or if there's, frankly, other perjury cases. That was a significant concern of ours.
As if working a second job, Walsh reports for long debriefs with authorities through the end of 1996.
During the 2.5 years where I was being debriefed by the state and federal attorneys, I had to go over each of my arrests, each of my bad acts. I had to tell them where it happened, when it happened, what I did, who I was with, who knew about it. And then I just gave up cop after cop after cop. With my cooperation, at least 6, probably more cops got arrested.
We called this Operation Domino for a reason.
U.S. Attorney's code name for the case was Domino. Effectively, one after another would fall. I always called it the Dirty 30.
Between 1994 and 1997, 33 officers from the 30th Precinct are convicted and locked up for police misconduct. It's nearly 1/4 of the precinct. The worst offenses are narcotics, distribution, and grand larceny. The investigation is long and expensive and leads to scores of convicted criminals being set free.
There were civil suits that were brought for false imprisonment, and we ended up, dismissing hundreds of cases, releasing people from prison. You also had the cost of the investigation, the prosecutions. So it's in the realm of millions of dollars.
Because of his cooperation, Joe Walsh receives a reduced sentence.
I was sentenced to 9 months federal time and 9 months concurrent state time, and I served about 7.5 months, and then I was home for about a month home arrest.
To this day, the Dirty 30 investigation is considered a major success in New York's fight against police corruption.
We, NYPD, played a good role in this investigation, and we did a good job. I'm convinced that we got the heart of the bad cops.
But there needs to be vigilance. It can't be something that you do because there were a whole series of arrests in 1994. It has to continue. It has to be sustained and sustainable. And that's the key, really, to preventing, deterring, and addressing police misconduct.
Because of what I did, because I was convicted and pled guilty, I gave up my pension. I gave up my freedom. I'm a felon for the rest of my life. Always do the right thing, whether there's somebody there or not to see you. You always have to do the right thing. And it's a long, hard, bumpy path, but I'm finally the person I should be.
There was a complete breakdown in oversight in the New York City Police Department. Nobody there feared being arrested. Not at all. Without effective independent oversight, organizations can end up like the NYPD did in that time period. And ultimately, the people in the community are the ones who pay the price.